This is one of those memories that never really fades. It's been years now, and most of the details of my life back then have blurred together, like old photographs left in the sun. But that night in the woods, that one, stayed perfectly clear. I was 24 when it happened. No wife, no kids, no real responsibilities beyond paying rent and showing up to work on Monday. Back then, I spent most of my free time outdoors, hiking, camping, backpacking, anything that got me away from people for a while. Looking back now, I realize how reckless some of those trips were. I'd drive hours out to some remote trailhead, hike miles into the forest, alone, and disappear for days. No cell service, no GPS beacon, nothing. Just a map, a compass, and whatever supplies I could carry. At the time, I loved it. This particular trip took place deep in the mountains of northern Georgia, not far from the edge of the Appalachian Range. It was late October, and the weather had just started to turn cold. I had 3 days off work, and decided to spend them backpacking through a stretch of forest I'd never explored before. The trail itself wasn't very popular. The parking area was nothing more than a dirt pull-off beside a gravel road. When I arrived that morning, there were only 2 other vehicles parked there, both covered in dust, like they hadn't moved in days. That didn't bother me. If anything, it made the place more appealing. I liked the quiet. The first several hours of hiking were exactly what I'd hoped for. The trail wound through dense pine and hardwood forest, climbing gradually higher into the mountains. Leaves crunched under my boots, and the air had that crisp autumn smell that only shows up right before winter. Every once in a while I'd stop, take a drink of water, and just listen. No traffic, no voices, just wind moving through the trees. By early afternoon, I'd hiked far enough that the trail had basically disappeared into a faint path. That was fine by me. I'd planned on setting up camp somewhere off the trail anyway. Eventually, I found a small clearing beside a narrow creek and decided it was perfect. There was flat ground for my tent and plenty of dead wood nearby for a fire. I set up camp, filtered some water, and spent the rest of the afternoon wandering around the area. Everything felt normal, peaceful even. It wasn't until later evening that I noticed the first thing that felt off. I was gathering firewood about 50 yards from my tent when I saw a tree with something carved into the bark. At first, I assumed it was just initials or some random mark someone had made years ago. But when I got closer, I realized it wasn't letters. It looked more like deep gouges, long, vertical scratches that ran from shoulder height almost all the way down the trunk. There were 4 of them, spaced evenly apart. I remember running my fingers along the grooves, trying to figure out what could have made them. They were too deep for a pocket knife, too clean for animal claws. I shrugged it off and went back to collecting wood. But after that, I started noticing other things. A broken branch that looked freshly snapped, a boot print in the mud beside the creek that definitely wasn't mine, and a few yards away from camp, half buried in leaves, I found an empty food wrapper that looked fairly new. At that point, I assumed someone else had camped there recently. It wasn't a big deal. Plenty of hikers passed through those woods. Still, I hadn't seen a single person since leaving the trailhead. Night came quickly once the sun dropped behind the mountains. The temperature fell with it. I built a small fire beside my tent and cooked a simple dinner, while the forest slowly darkened around me. By the time I finished eating, the woods had gone completely silent. If you've ever spent time deep in the forest at night, you know the kind of quiet I'm talking about. It's not peaceful and quiet. It's heavy, like the whole world is holding its breath. I sat there for a while, staring into the fire, listening. Every now and then, a twig would snap somewhere in the distance. Probably deer, maybe a raccoon. Eventually, the fire burned low, and I crawled into my tent. I must have been asleep for a couple of hours before something woke me up. At first, I thought it was the wind. The sound was faint, just a soft rustling somewhere outside the tent. I lay there in my sleeping bag, staring into the darkness, trying to listen. The rustling came again, closer this time. Then, I heard something that made my stomach tighten. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, moving through the leaves. They stopped, just outside my campsite. My heart started pounding. I held my breath and waited. Nothing happened for a long time. No movement, no sound. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably just an animal, a deer, wandering through the area. Still, I didn't fall back asleep easily. Sometime later, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, I heard something else. A soft, metallic sound, like someone lightly tapping metal against metal. It came from the direction of my backpack. That's when I knew. It wasn't an animal. I slowly reached over and grabbed the flashlight beside my sleeping bag. My hands were shaking. For a moment, I considered just staying inside the tent and waiting for whatever was out there to leave. But another sound came from outside. The zipper of my backpack is moving, very slowly. Someone was going through my gear. Adrenaline hit me like a shock. Before I could think better of it, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside with the flashlight raised. The beam cut through the darkness. For a split second, I didn't see anyone. Then, the light landed on a figure standing near my backpack. A man. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes that looked almost black in the flashlight beam. His head turned toward me, slowly, and the moment the light hit his face, he ran. Not away from the campsite, toward the trees behind it. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness. I stood there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. My backpack was still sitting where I left it, half open. Nothing seemed missing, but the feeling of being alone in those woods was gone. Completely gone. I didn't sleep after that. I packed up my gear as quietly as possible and decided to leave at first light. Every few minutes I'd shine my flashlight into the trees, half expecting to see that man standing there again. But the woods stayed dark and empty. At least, that's what I thought. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps again. This time, they weren't near the tent. They were circling the campsite, slowly, crunching through the leaves, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Every time I turned the beam in that direction, the sound would stop. Then, it would start again somewhere else, closer. The realization crept into my mind piece by piece. He hadn't left. He was still out there, watching. The moment things truly went bad happened just before dawn. I had almost finished packing when a rock slammed into the side of my tent, hard enough to knock one of the poles loose. I spun around and aimed the flashlight toward the trees. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, I saw him, standing between 2 trees about 30 feet away. Just watch me. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my legs didn't move. The man slowly stepped forward, and that's when I noticed something in his hand. A knife, long and thin, catching the faint light of my flashlight. The second he started walking toward me, the paralysis broke. I grabbed my pack and ran. Branches slapped against my face as I crashed through the woods, heading downhill toward where I thought the trail might be. Behind me, I heard footsteps, fast, closing the distance. At one point, I slipped on wet leaves and slammed into the ground. For a split second, I thought it was over, but adrenaline shoved me back to my feet. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. I don't know how long that chase lasted. 10 minutes, maybe 20. Eventually, the forest thinned and I stumbled onto a dirt service road. The moment I hit open ground, I kept running. Another 100 yards down the road, I saw headlights. A pickup truck. I ran straight into the middle of the road, waving my arms like a lunatic. The driver slammed on the brakes. When he rolled down the window, the first thing he said was that I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I must have been covered in dirt and blood from falling in the woods. Between gasping breaths, I told him someone had chased me through the forest. The man let me climb into the truck and drove me straight to the nearest ranger station. They sent officers out to search the area, but they never found anyone. No footprints, no campsite, nothing. I still think about that night sometimes, about how quiet the woods were, about the sound of those footsteps. Circling my tent in the dark, the rangers told me it was probably some drifter living out there who got scared when I confronted him. Maybe that's true. Maybe it was just a desperate guy looking for food. But the thing that still bothers me is that he didn't run away when I found him. He stayed and waited for the moment I was most vulnerable. I still go hiking sometimes, but never alone, because somewhere out there, in those forests, someone learned exactly how easy it is to hunt a human being in the dark. My name's Aaron, and this happened about 9 years ago, when I was 22. I still think about it sometimes when I'm out in the woods, especially when everything goes quiet in that weird way forests sometimes do. The kind of quiet where you suddenly notice how alone you actually are. I've spent a lot of time camping and hiking over the years, and I've had my fair share of uncomfortable moments out there. But this This was the only time I've ever been genuinely afraid that something might happen to me, and no one would ever know why. Back then, I was living in a small town in northern Pennsylvania. It was one of those places where there wasn't much to do unless you liked being outside. Most of my weekends were spent hiking, fishing, or camping somewhere in the state forests nearby. My friend Matt was usually the one I went with. We'd known each other since high school, and he was the type of guy who was always down for whatever dumb outdoor idea I came up with. Matt wasn't reckless, exactly, but he definitely had that personality where if someone said, "We probably shouldn't do that," he'd immediately want to try it. One Friday afternoon, he called me and said, "Are you doing anything this weekend?" I told him, "No." He said, "Good. I found this old logging road on a satellite map. It goes way out into the state forest. Like, way out." "What's out there?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "That's the whole point." Apparently, he'd been browsing online forums where people share remote camping spots, and someone mentioned this area that barely anyone went to anymore. The road wasn't maintained, and most people didn't even know it existed. Matt wanted to drive as far down it as possible, hike a few miles, and camp overnight. At the time, that sounded perfect. We left early Saturday morning in Matt's beat-up Jeep. It was the kind of vehicle that looked like it had already survived several bad decisions. The drive out took about 3 hours. Eventually, we left the main highway and started winding through smaller and smaller back roads, until we reached a narrow dirt road that looked like it hadn't been graded in years. Matt slowed the Jeep and said, "This should be it." The entrance to the logging road was barely visible. Branches hung low over it, and weeds were growing right down the middle. "Looks welcoming," I said. Matt just grinned and drove straight in. For the next 40 minutes, we crawled down this rough dirt path, dodging potholes and fallen branches. Trees closed in tightly on both sides, and eventually, it got to the point where we could barely see the sky through the canopy. Finally, the road got too rough to continue. Matt killed the engine. "That's probably as far as we're going," he said. We grabbed our packs, checked our flashlights, and started hiking. The plan was simple. Follow the old road about 3 miles deeper into the forest, find a flat spot, set up camp, and hike back out the next day. At first, the walk was actually really nice. The forest was thick but quiet, and the air smelled like pine and damp leaves. After about an hour, though, something started to feel different. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but the woods felt strange out there. Eventually, we found a small clearing just off the old road. It looked like it might have been a staging area for logging equipment decades ago. The ground was mostly flat and covered in moss. "Perfect," Matt said, dropping his pack. We set up our small tent and gathered some fallen branches for a fire. The sun was starting to sink lower through the trees, and that golden evening light was coming through the forest. For a while, everything felt normal again. We made some instant noodles over a small camp stove and sat around talking. But the deeper it got into the evening, the more I started noticing how quiet the woods were. Not peaceful, quiet. Empty quiet. There were no birds, no insects, nothing. At one point, I mentioned it. "You notice how there's like no animal sounds out here?" I said. Matt listened for a second. "Huh," he said. "Yeah, that's kind of weird." But he shrugged it off. Probably just the time of night. I tried to do the same, but something about it bothered me. It was fully dark by the time we finished eating. We had a small fire going, mostly for light. That's when we heard the first noise, somewhere off in the trees behind us. A single crack, like a branch snapping. Matt looked up. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I said. We both turned our flashlights toward the trees. Nothing, just darkness and tree trunks. "Probably a deer," Matt said. That made sense, but a few minutes later, it happened again. Another snap. Closer this time. This time, Matt stood up. "Hello?" he called out, jokingly. The woods stayed completely silent. No movement, no footsteps, nothing. We both kind of laughed it off, but neither of us sat back down right away. Eventually, we convinced ourselves it was just animals moving around. But after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching us. About an hour later, the fire had burned down to embers. We decided to turn in for the night. Matt crawled into the tent first while I stayed outside for a minute, just looking out into the trees. The darkness out there was thick. It felt like it was pressing in around the clearing. I was about to climb into the tent when I saw something. A small light, deep in the forest. It was faint, but it was definitely there. moving slowly between the trees. I froze. "Matt," I whispered. "What?" "Come here a second." He poked his head out of the tent. "What?" I pointed into the woods. "Do you see that?" He leaned forward and squinted. After a second, he said quietly, "Yeah." The light was moving, slowly, like someone walking. But something about it was off. The light wasn't bouncing like a flashlight usually does when someone walks. It was steady, almost perfectly steady. "Maybe another camper?" Matt whispered. "Out here?" I said. The light kept drifting closer, not directly toward us, but definitely in our direction. After a minute, Matt said quietly, "Why would someone be walking around out there with no other lights?" I didn't have an answer. The light stopped, just inside the tree line, maybe 40 yards from our camp. Neither of us moved. Neither of us said anything. It just sat there, perfectly still. Matt finally called out, "Hey, are you all right out there?" No response. The light didn't move. "Hello?" he said louder. Still nothing. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The light was too high. Not flashlight height, more like chest height. And it wasn't shining outward. It was just glowing, like a small lantern, but I still couldn't see anyone holding it. Then suddenly, it moved, fast, not walking fast, just sliding sideways between the trees. Like whoever had it didn't even make a sound while moving. Matt whispered, "Dude." The light moved again, closer. Now it was maybe 20 yards away. Still no sound. No footsteps. Nothing. Just that glowing light drifting between the trees. Matt grabbed my arm. "We should probably get in the tent," he said. I nodded immediately. We both climbed inside. The tent felt ridiculously small all of a sudden. Neither of us laid down. We just sat there, listening. After about 30 seconds, we heard something outside. A slow crunch. Leaves under a foot. Then another. Someone was definitely walking around the clearing now. "Right outside the tent," Matt whispered. "Don't say anything." The footsteps stopped. Right next to the tent, I could see a faint glow through the fabric. The light was right there. Whoever it was stood there for what felt like several minutes, completely silent. Then the footsteps started again, circling the tent, slow, deliberate, like they were examining it. I was holding my breath. Finally, the footsteps stopped again, and then the light disappeared. Not walk away, just gone. The clearing went completely dark. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Neither of us moved. Eventually, Matt whispered, "I think they left." But neither of us slept that night. When the sky finally started getting lighter, we got out of the tent immediately. The clearing looked completely normal. No one was there. But something else caught my attention. Footprints. In the soft dirt near the tent. But there was only one set, just one person. And the tracks circled the tent several times. But what really bothered me was where they came from. The prints appeared right at the edge of the clearing. No incoming trail. No outgoing trail. Just a circle around the tent. And then they stopped. Like the person had simply vanished back into the woods without leaving another step. Matt and I packed up in record time. Neither of us said much during the hike back. And when we reached the Jeep, we both just kind of looked at each other. Matt finally said, "Let's not camp there again." I agreed. I've spent plenty of nights in the woods since then, and nothing like that has ever happened again. But sometimes, when I'm out there and I see a light moving between the trees, I still wonder if someone was really walking around our camp that night, or if it was something else entirely. I've spent a lot of time in the woods by myself, not in the casual, short hike on a Saturday kind of way, but the kind where you pack everything you need on your back and disappear for a few days. I started doing it in my early 20s and never really stopped. At this point, I'm in my mid-30s, and most of my vacations are still just solo trips into places where cell service disappears, and the nights get very quiet. I'm comfortable out there. I know how to navigate, how to set up camp, how to handle wildlife. I'm not the type of person who gets easily rattled by normal forest sounds. Owls, coyotes, deer moving through brush in the dark. I've heard it all. But there was one trip a few years ago that still bothers me. Not because I think I ran into something supernatural. I don't believe in that kind of thing. What bothers me is that everything that happened was real, physical, and left evidence behind, and I still have absolutely no idea what caused it. It happened during a 3-day solo trip deep in a national forest in northern Pennsylvania. I'd been there a couple times before. It's the kind of place where the forest just goes on forever. Rolling hills, thick hardwoods, and miles of trail that most people never bother hiking. If you go far enough from the main trailheads, you can spend days without seeing another person. That was exactly what I wanted. I'd been dealing with a lot of stress from work, and I needed a few quiet days to clear my head. I drove out early on a Thursday morning, parked my truck at a gravel lot off a Forest Service road, and started hiking around 9:30. My pack was about 40 pounds. Tent, food, water filter, extra layers, basic gear. I also had a small revolver that I usually carry when I'm alone in remote areas. Not because I expect trouble, but because you never know what you might run into. The first day was perfect. The trail followed a narrow ridge for most of the morning before dropping into a valley where a creek wound through the trees. The weather was cool and overcast, which made the hike comfortable. Leaves were starting to change color, and every once in a while, a gust of wind would send a few drifting down through the canopy. Around mid-afternoon, I found a flat patch of ground near the creek that looked like a good place to camp. It was tucked between some large hemlocks, with enough open space for a small fire. I set up my tent, filtered some water, and spent the rest of the evening just relaxing. The woods were quiet in that peaceful way they sometimes are before dark. A few birds here and there, the creek moving over rocks, the occasional rustle of squirrels in the leaves. Nothing unusual. I cooked dinner, sat by the fire for a while, and turned in around 10. Sometime during the night, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. It wasn't a loud noise that woke me. It was more like that strange moment when your brain just suddenly switches on. I lay there in my sleeping bag for a minute, listening. The forest was mostly quiet, but after a few seconds, I noticed something. There was a faint light outside my tent. Not bright, just a dim, flickering glow, moving through the fabric walls. I unzipped the tent and looked out. About 100 yards away through the trees, I could see what looked like a small campfire. It wasn't huge, but it was definitely on fire, orange and flickering between the trunks of the trees. My first thought was that someone else had set up camp nearby after I'd gone to sleep. That wasn't impossible. Even deep in the forest, you occasionally run into other hikers. I watched the fire for a minute or two, expecting to hear voices or see someone moving around it. But I didn't. The fire just burned there, quietly. No silhouettes, no movement, no sound. After a while, I figured whoever it was had already gone to sleep and left their fire burning low. Not the smartest thing to do, but people do it. I zipped my tent closed and went back to sleep. The next morning, I remembered the fire immediately, not because it scared me, but because I was curious. If someone else was out there, I figured I might run into them eventually. After packing up camp, I walked in the direction where I'd seen the light the night before. It didn't take long to reach the area. There was a small clearing between some large oaks that matched the direction and distance I remembered. But when I stepped into it, I stopped. There was no fire pit, no rocks arranged in a circle, no ashes, no burnt wood. The ground was covered in leaves, completely undisturbed. I walked around the clearing slowly, looking for any sign that someone had camped there. There was nothing. No footprints, no gear marks, no trash, not even a patch of scorched dirt. I stood there for a while trying to figure out how that was possible. I knew what I'd seen the night before, but eventually I convinced myself I must have misjudged the location somehow. So I kept hiking. The trail climbed higher into thicker forest as the day went on. By late afternoon, the trees were taller and older, and the canopy blocked most of the sunlight. It was noticeably quieter there. I found another place to camp on a gentle slope overlooking a narrow ravine. It felt remote and peaceful, which was exactly what I was looking for. That evening was normal. I made dinner, watched the sky darken through the trees, and crawled into my tent a little after 9. I fell asleep pretty quickly. Then, sometime later that night, a sound ripped through the forest so violently that it snapped me awake instantly. It was a loud, cracking noise, not a small branch snapping, something massive. The sound went on for several seconds, wood splitting, branches tearing, and then it ended with a deep, heavy thud that I actually felt. Through the ground beneath me, a tree had fallen. It sounded like it was somewhere off to my left, maybe a few hundred yards away. If you've ever heard a full-size tree come down in the woods, It's an incredible sound, powerful and sudden, but what confused me was the weather. There was no storm, no strong wind. The night was completely still. I lay there for a while, listening to my heartbeat slowly calm down. Eventually, I started to relax again. Then, about 10 minutes later, it happened again. Another violent cracking sound. This one was much closer. Branches snapping, wood splitting, followed by another heavy crash. But this time, the sound came from a completely different direction. Now, I was wide awake. 2 trees falling in the middle of a calm, windless night didn't make much sense. And then, I heard something else. It started as a low rumbling sound somewhere out in the darkness. At first, I thought it might be distant thunder, but it wasn't. It had a strange texture to it, almost like a deep groaning noise. It wasn't short either. The sound went on continuously for several seconds, then longer. It sounded almost like something dragging across wood, mixed with a deep, animal-like growl. I grabbed my revolver and sat there in the darkness, listening. The sound continued for nearly a minute before slowly fading away into the distance. After that, the forest went completely silent. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. As soon as daylight started creeping through the trees, I got out of my tent. I packed up quickly, but before leaving, I wanted to see one thing. I walked toward the direction where the second tree had fallen. It didn't take long to find it. The tree was enormous, a huge oak lying across the slope with branches scattered everywhere. But when I reached the base of the trunk, something immediately felt wrong. The tree hadn't snapped from wind stress. The wood at the break point looked torn. Large sections of the trunk were splintered outward in long, jagged grooves. The bark had been ripped away in strips, exposing pale wood underneath. Some of the gouges in the trunk were deep, easily an inch or more. It looked less like the tree had fallen, and more like something had been tearing into it. I crouched there, staring at the damage, trying to make sense of it. Then, I noticed something near one of the broken branches, a small blue piece of fabric. I walked over and picked it up. It was my bandana. Right next to it was a small metal carabiner, also mine. My stomach dropped immediately. I opened my pack and checked the side pocket where I normally kept them. Both were missing. Something had taken them from my gear and left them here. I didn't waste another second. I stuffed everything into my backpack, tightened the straps, and started hiking out as fast as I could. The entire time, I had the overwhelming feeling that something was watching me from somewhere in those woods. Every snapped twig behind me made my heart jump. It took most of the day to reach my truck. I don't think I stopped walking once. Even after I got back on the road, that uneasy feeling stuck with me for hours. I still go camping. I still spend time in remote forests, but I've never gone back to that area because whatever was strong enough to tear into a tree like that and quietly go through my gear while I was sleeping nearby was definitely out there in those woods with me.